Yesterday's bombshell filing from special counsel Jack Smith lays out stunning new details about Donald Trump's plan to undermine the 2020 election at all costs. Among its revelations, Trump privately told advisors he would simply declare victory before all the ballots were counted and any winner was projected. And after Trump was told that Rudy Giuliani would not be able to prove his false fraud allegations in court, he said, the details don't matter. Also, Trump and his allies often just made up statistics about voter fraud, quote, from whole cloth. Smith wrote that when it came to Trump and his co-conspirators' claims about non-citizen voters, the conspirators started with the allegation that 36,000 non-citizens voted in Arizona. 5 days later, it was beyond credulity that a few 100,000 didn't vote. 3 weeks later, the bare minimum was 40 or 50,000. The reality is about 250,000 days after that. The assertion was then 32,000. And ultimately, the conspirators landed right back where they started at 36,000, a false figure that they never verified or corroborated. But perhaps what's even more alarming is that it sure seems like Trump is ready to do all the things that Jack Smith is accusing him of all over again with the 2024 election. A lot of these new details sound pretty identical to what Trump has been saying for months now, as he preemptively lays the groundwork to once again dispute the results, making absurd claims about how this election will be rigged and Democrats are cheating. New reporting from NBC's Vaughn Hillyard highlights that this year, Trump and his campaign have cited more than a dozen examples of so-called election interference activities by Americans to claim the upcoming election is being unfairly manipulated, despite having no evidence. And joining me now is the aforementioned NBC correspondent, Vaughn Hillyard. Vaughn, okay, so what are the new allegations of so-called cheating?
We have seen Donald Trump co-opt terms like fake news, right? Or collusion. Any word that is ever used against him, he takes it and he uses it to his own political advantage. Election interference. Over the course of these last months this summer, he has consistently began throwing out that word to not only around the criminal indictments, the Eugene Carroll defamation ruling, the civil fraud ruling. He's called all of these things election interference. Right. But he's also suggested the fact that Secret Service 1 week ago told them that they did not have the resources to hold an outdoor rally in Wisconsin on a particular Saturday. He said that that was election interference. Okay. He said Google is, again, there's nothing to this, but he said that Google is causing bad stories about him to pop up and only good stories about Kamala Harris to pop up. He says that's election interference. His spokesman says that the release of The Apprentice, which is going to be in films here before Election Day, which paints a not so great image of Donald Trump in his early life, they're calling that election interference. And yet there is not a single shred of evidence of cheating so far, of course, but also there is no specific allegation. I went to the campaign. There's no specific allegation of any domestic actor, of any single American 1 month from the election engaging in any illegal activity. And we say that's important because, as you noted, 4 years ago, it was at a rally a month before the 2020 election. Donald Trump, from a rally stage, said the words, "It's a rigged election. It's the only way we're going to lose." He's doing the same thing now. You said it. He's foreshadowing what's. And you spend a lot of time at these rallies talking with Trump voters. I know that you've done some recent. We've got some sound that I want to play now, because the thing that's frightening about it is that it has become a real article of faith among Trump's voting base that there is no way he can lose unless there is some fraud or cheating. That's core to how he got people to sack the Capitol. Let's play a little bit of this. In November, if the results come back and they say that he didn't win the election,
I won't believe that. I honestly will not believe that. And I bet 100% the people here will not believe that.
I think that's an impossibility.
You would have zero reason to believe that.
Zero reason to believe
election results that show that he lost.
There's no way that he could lose the election in a free and fair election.
What if the results do come out that way and they show that? Well, you won't believe it, but
the reason I won't believe it is because they keep pressing mail-in ballots.
I cannot tell you how many times I have also heard this when I just listened to interviews that you've done and that we've seen other people do, this idea that mail-in ballots are going to come in and stole the election, it is a belief system among them. And as you know, you cannot have a democracy if a certain percentage of people don't believe in the results. Exactly.
And I think that that's the part of, on a human level, struggled with the most, is hearing so many people saying already before votes have been cast. That was back in April here. I've had conversations for months that are just like that here. We could roll the tape for a long time and take up the rest of your show because there is a segment of the population that takes Donald Trump's words and they parrot them. When he says election interference, time and again I hear from his supporters, election interference, election interference. Just today in Colorado, a former county clerk was just sentenced to 9 years in prison for essentially election interference, right? Like, and this is the part, though, that where are we going 1 month from now? I don't know. What does another January 6th look like? I don't know. But there is a segment of the population, it's not a majority, but there is a heavy, potent minority of the American population that believes the last election was taken. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris shouldn't be in office. And that is the concerning part as we go into this November here. It is not just Donald Trump's words in the concern around how Donald Trump could use his power, but it is the power that the American citizens have when they don't believe in the basis of our elections.
And when J.D. Vance cannot say that Donald Trump lost the last election, and when he is also pushing that, and when Republicans on Capitol Hill are pushing bills saying it's people who are not citizens shouldn't vote, that's already illegal. That's part of it, right? I mean, the Republican Party is also parroting this.
Correct. And this is where you have seen the likes of Liz Cheney's, the Paul Ryans, the Mitt Romneys. They're no longer the foundation of this Republican Party here. And if it weren't for, let's be very, very clear. Those 2022 midterms, I think, defined 2024 because there were election deniers that were running for governor in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Georgia, in Arizona, for Secretary of State, in Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin. They all lost. And that was a moment that I think that we are looking at sort of what is the doomsday? How could they potentially try to manipulate the system today? There are a lot of ways. There are a lot of counties, and they're not just Democratic counties or the maybe suburb counties. There's concerns about what are those county recorders and clerks in the very red districts. The very red districts, right? Some of these MAGA
Trump
folks,
will win.
the Trump loyal faithful, it will win. But if they don't certify, it'll keep the state from being able to certify the results. There is a law and order, and Donald Trump has their back. And I think that is the takeaway, and that is where these voters, they also know who has their back. The leader of their party, the former president, and the guy that they believe should be the next president.
That is the doomsday scenario. It is why I don't sleep. Vaughn Hillyard, not helping my insomnia, not helping cure my insomnia, but excellent reporting. Great journalist. Thank you, friend. Appreciate you.